A dust cloud on the horizon meant only one thing in these parts: trouble. Pure and simple. But for 20-year-old Ayanna, her heart wasn't hammering because of the riders coming for Copper Ridge. It was hammering because of the letter in her hands. A piece of paper that held two futures, one where her people were saved, and one where everything she had ever known burned to the ground. 3 months earlier, her world was quiet. The Arizona sun bled gold and crimson across the territory as she gathered herbs by the creek. This creek was a border. Her tribe's land on one side, the sprawling Meridian Ranch on the other. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats. She froze, melting into the shade of the cottonwood trees. She watched a man dismount from a black stallion. He wore a weathered hat that cast shadows over a face carved from the same red stone as the mesas. This was Cole Meridian. A man who moved like he owned everything the sun touched. And the truth was, he pretty much did. At 30, he'd built the biggest ranching operation in the territory. But that kind of success always comes at a price. The whispers in town said he was ruthless. That small-time ranchers had a funny way of selling their land to him after getting a visit from his men in the dead of night. But as Ayanna watched him kneel by the water, she saw something else. She saw the gentleness in the way he let his horse drink. Then his eyes lifted. And they found hers. Across that narrow creek, time just stopped. He saw an Apache girl, standing as still as a deer, her long black hair shining like silk in the morning light. Her dress was a mix of worlds, traditional beadwork on practical cotton. She was a woman caught between the ancient ways and the new reality of the white man. Cole had seen native women before, but none with her kind of quiet fire. Neither of them spoke. Not a word. Cole just mounted his horse and rode away. But something had been broken that morning. The invisible wall that kept their two worlds apart now had a crack in it. He came back 3 days later. Same spot, same time. He said he was just watering his horse, Thunder. Ayanna was there, her basket half full of the plants her grandmother taught her to find. He spoke first. His voice was rough, like a man who gave orders, not conversation. "Morning, miss." Ayanna just nodded, her dark eyes never leaving his face. She'd learned English at the mission school before her father pulled her out. He said the white man's words would make her forget her people. But she understood him. More than that, she heard the thing he wasn't saying, the deep, aching loneliness hiding behind all that power. This became their ritual, a delicate dance of not quite talking. He'd show up at the creek. She'd be gathering her herbs. They'd stand on opposite sides of the water, two worlds staring at each other, feeling a pull neither one of them could explain. Until one Tuesday morning, when the dance ended, and the world came crashing in. Her younger brother, Nailish, burst through the trees, his face pale with panic. He was only 12, and he spoke in a rush of Apache, pointing frantically back toward the main road. Cole, who'd been pretending to check his horse's shoe while secretly watching Ayanna, straightened up fast. He saw the boy's terror. "What's wrong?" Cole asked, the concern in his voice surprising even himself. Ayanna finally looked him straight in the eye, her perfect composure cracking. "My brother says men are coming," she said, her voice tight. "White men with papers. They wear the badges of the territorial government." Cole's blood ran cold. He knew who they were, the territorial commissioners. They came with new laws, new papers, and old greed. They'd show up, declare native lands unoccupied, and force everyone out. And he knew, with a sickening certainty, that the small piece of land Ayanna's people lived on was right in the crosshairs of some very powerful developers. He didn't even think about it. He just moved. He strode right across the creek, the cold water soaking his leather boots. For the first time, he and Ayanna stood on the same side of the line. The fear in her eyes was colder than the water on his feet. "How long do you have?" he asked. She spoke to her brother, who held up 3 fingers, pointing at the sun. 3 hours, she said. Maybe less. Cole's mind was a whirlwind. He had land, he had power, he had connections. But using them to help her would mean war. It would mean making enemies of the very men who ran this territory. men who already hated him for his success. He looked at her face, at the quiet strength holding back a world of fear, and he made a choice. "There might be something I can do," he said, his voice low. "But it would mean trusting me. Really trusting me." Her people had a long, bloody history of broken white promises, of treaties that turned to dust before the ink was dry. But in Cole Meridian's eyes she saw something different, something that felt dangerously like hope. "What do you need?" she asked. His plan was insane. It was risky. It was probably illegal, and it was their only shot. He told her to bring her people to his ranch. All of them. He would claim they were his employees. Guides, translators, seasonal workers. The commissioners could seize unoccupied native land, but they couldn't legally touch workers on private property. Not without a long, messy court battle. It was a lie. A big one. But it might just buy them enough time. Ayanna sent Nalish running back to their village with the proposal. Then she and Cole stood alone by the creek, the air thick with unspoken things. The world they knew was about to end. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why risk all this for us?" Cole took off his hat, running a hand through hair that was turning gray too soon. He was tired. Tired of being the man everyone feared. Tired of building his empire on the ashes of other men's dreams. But most of all, he was tired of being alone. And this woman, this quiet Apache girl, made him want to be a man worthy of her trust. "Maybe because it's the right thing to do," he said. But they both knew it was more than that. It was so much more. Within 2 hours, they came. A small, silent caravan of Apache families, carrying their entire lives on their backs. Ayanna walked with her grandmother, a woman whose face was a road map of 100 years of hardship. And just as Nalish had warned, the commissioners arrived. They rode hard, kicking up a storm of dust, their faces set in stone. The lead commissioner, a man named Hartwell, was thin and pale, with the cruel eyes of a man who loved his power. Cole met them at his front gate. He wasn't alone. His foreman, Jake, and 2 of his toughest ranch hands stood with him. "Mr. Meridian," Hartwell said, not even bothering to get off his horse, "we have reports of an illegal native settlement. We require access to your land." Cole looked at the official papers Hartwell held out. He kept his face like a mask. "I don't see any illegal settlement, Commissioner," Cole said calmly. "Just my employees." Hartwell's eyes narrowed. He could see the Apache families setting up a temporary camp in the distance. "Those are not employees, sir. They are unauthorized natives, and you are obstructing federal law." This was the moment the lie had to hold. "They are guides and seasonal workers," Cole said, his voice as steady as a rock. "I have contracts, filed with the Territorial Land Office yesterday morning." This was the twist Cole had prepared. He'd spent the entire night with his lawyer from Tucson, a man who owed him more than one favor. They had forged every single document. They looked real. They felt real. And challenging them in court would take months. Months Hartwell didn't have. The standoff was a battle of wills. Hartwell threatened. He blustered. Cole didn't budge. Finally, Hartwell spun his horse around, his face purple with rage. He promised to return with federal marshals, with the full weight of the government. As he rode away, a single thought echoed in Cole's mind. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The arrangement was supposed to be temporary. A few weeks, maybe a month. But weeks turned into a season, and the Meridian Ranch changed. The quiet Apache families brought a life to the place it had never known. Ayanna was the bridge. She helped Cole negotiate trade with other tribes. Her knowledge of plants and herbs saved more than one cowboy from a nasty infection or a rattlesnake bite. Her presence changed him too. The hard edges began to soften. He started paying his men more. He helped smaller ranchers struggling through the drought. The man they used to fear was becoming a man they started to respect. But in the Arizona territory, respect and trouble were 2 sides of the same coin. Word spread. Cole Meridian, the ruthless rancher, was a native sympathizer. The threats started small. A dead calf here, a cut fence line there. Then came the letters. Anonymous warnings. His business partners pulled out. The banks suddenly wouldn't touch his loan applications. He was being isolated, choked out. He was becoming an enemy of his own kind. Then came the night that pushed them to the edge. He returned late from the northern pastures to find Ayana waiting for him on the porch of the main house. One look at her face, and he knew. The peace was over. "There's going to be trouble," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "My cousin, Marcus. He works as a janitor in the territorial office. He says Hartwell has a federal judge in his pocket. They've issued new papers. They're coming back, Cole. This time, with soldiers." The weight of it settled on his shoulders, heavy as a tombstone. He had known this day would come. When? He asked. 3 days. Maybe 4. She hesitated, and the look in her eyes sent a chill down his spine. "But Cole, there's something else." Her voice dropped so low he could barely hear it. "They know about us." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He and Ayana had been so careful, so proper in public. But looks can't be hidden. Whispers can't be silenced. In a place where a white man and a native woman being together was seen as a crime, their connection was a weapon. And their enemies were ready to use it. "What do they know?" he asked, his voice tight. She reached into her dress and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It had been left at her family's shelter that morning. He unfolded it. The words were few, but they were pure poison. It wasn't just a threat. It was a checkmate. Unless Cole threw every Apache family off his land immediately, certain photographs would be sent to every newspaper in the territory. He knew they were lies, fabricated, taken out of context. But it wouldn't matter. The scandal would ruin him. It would make him a target for every vigilante mob from here to the border. But that wasn't the worst part. Not even close. The note contained another threat, a more personal one. If Cole refused, Ayana would be arrested. The charge? Seducing a white landowner to steal territorial secrets. It was a death sentence. In this climate, she'd be imprisoned, or worse. He crushed the paper in his fist. He was trapped, cornered. The love he felt for her, and he couldn't deny it anymore. It was love. Had become a cage. "We have to end this," Ayana said softly, her eyes filled with a pain that mirrored his own. "You have risked too much for us." She was willing to sacrifice everything to save him. And he was willing to lose everything to save her. And in trying to save each other, they were about to destroy the one beautiful thing they had built together. "No," Cole said, his voice raw. "I'm not letting them win. Not this time." A decision formed in his mind, sharp and clear as glass. He had built an empire on calculation and fear. But some things couldn't be bought. Some things couldn't be intimidated. Some things you had to fight for, no matter the cost. The next morning, the ranch became a war camp. He sent riders to Tucson, to his lawyers, with instructions to liquidate his assets, to turn his wealth into a war chest. He sent other riders to every man who owed him a favor, calling in debts that had been gathering dust for years. If Hartwell wanted a war, he was about to get one. But as Cole watched Ayana teaching her young cousins how to tend the garden she'd planted, he knew this wasn't about land or money. It was about her. He would not abandon the woman who had taught him how to be a man again. That's when he heard it. The thunder of hoofbeats. His foreman, Jake Morrison, was riding toward the house like the devil himself was on his tail. The look on Jake's face said it all. Their time had just run out. Jake Morrison was a man who'd seen it all. Range wars, stampedes, blizzards. But Cole had never seen him look this scared. "Boss, we got problems," Jake said, his voice ragged. "Big problems. Riders, coming from 3 directions. They're surrounding the ranch." Cole's gut clenched. "How many?" 40, maybe 50. Some are territorial marshals. But boss, there's others. Men I know. Vigilantes from down Tombstone way. This wasn't a legal action. This was a lynch mob with badges. Hartwell wasn't coming to arrest him. He was coming to erase him. Ayana was suddenly at his side, her face a mask of calm, but her eyes betrayed the storm inside. Behind her, her people were gathering, their faces turned toward the 3 dust clouds on the horizon. "How much time?" Cole asked. Jake squinted. "An hour, if we're lucky. They're moving fast, coordinated. This is an execution." The ranch house was strong. but it wouldn't hold against 50 rifles. Escape was impossible. Not with children and the elderly. Surrender was a death sentence. "Jake," Cole ordered, his voice sharp. "Get the men. Every hand willing to fight. Set up defensive lines. But nobody fires first. Nobody." As Jake ran off, Cole turned to Ayanna. "You have to go. Take your people north, into the canyons. Hide." She shook her head. Her resolve was like iron. "We will not run again. My grandmother cannot make that journey. The children are too small. And running only proves their lies." He wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. "This is my fight," he said, his voice desperate. "Not yours." She stepped closer, placing her hand on his arm. The touch was electric. "You made it our fight when you crossed that creek," she said. "We will not abandon you now." The dust clouds were closer. He could see the glint of sun on rifle barrels. At the head of the largest group rode Commissioner Hartwell, sitting tall in his saddle, a conquering hero in his own mind. This was it. The final move. Cole walked to his gun cabinet and took out his Winchester. It felt heavy, final. A young Apache warrior, Chaza, barely 17, stepped up to him. He held an old cavalry rifle, a relic from a war his grandfather had fought. "We fight together," Chaza said in his careful English. "Honor demands it." All around them, an impossible alliance was forming. Cowboys and Apache warriors, side by side, preparing to defend their home against their own government. Cole took his position at the window. Ayanna stood beside him. He wanted to scream at her to hide, to get to safety. But he knew she wouldn't. Her place was here, with him. The riders stopped just out of rifle range. Hartwell dismounted and walked forward alone. A white cloth was tied to his rifle, a sick joke of a truce flag. "Cole Meridian," Hartwell's voice cut through the air. "By the authority of the territorial government, I order you to surrender yourself and the natives you are illegally harboring." Cole stepped out onto the porch, his own rifle held ready. "These people are my employees, Hartwell. I have the paperwork." Hartwell let out a bitter, mocking laugh. "Your forgeries have been rejected. You are charged with obstruction, and these natives are fugitives. You have 10 minutes to comply before we take this ranch by force." The threat hung in the hot desert air. Cole looked at the faces around him, his men, Ayanna's family. He looked at Ayanna, and he knew there was no choice left to make. "Commissioner!" Cole's voice boomed with an authority that shook the air. "You want these people? You'll have to come through me, and I promise you, that will not be as easy as you think." He saw the rage twist Hartwell's face. The commissioner had expected him to fold. He had miscalculated. Hartwell spun around and stormed back to his men. Ayanna's voice was a soft whisper beside him. "They will try to burn us out. It is their way." She was right. The buildings were tinder dry. Fire was the perfect weapon. "Jake!" Cole yelled. "The root cellar! Get everyone into the root cellar! It's the only thing that won't burn!" As families scrambled for the stone cellar, Cole saw something that froze his soul. Among Hartwell's men, he saw them. Known outlaws, murderers with bounties on their heads, now wearing territorial badges. This wasn't just a mob. It was an army of monsters. And then, the first shot rang out. The attack was a storm of lead and fire. Riders circled the ranch, pouring bullets into every window and door. Burning arrows arced through the sky, thudding into the dry wood of the barn. Cole fired back, aiming to wound, not to kill. But it was like trying to stop a flood with a teacup. The barn went up like a torch, painting the sky with black smoke and orange flames. The smoke was everywhere, thick and choking. Cole fought his way to the root cellar. Inside, 43 souls were crammed into a space meant for potatoes and preserves. The stone walls held back the bullets, but the smoke was seeping in, stealing the air from their lungs. Through the haze, Ayanna appeared at his side, her face smeared with ash, her eyes burning with fierce determination. She grabbed his arm. "There is another way out," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "An old mine tunnel. It connects to the back of the cellar. My brother found it. The old silver mine. He'd forgotten all about it. A relic from a time before he'd bought the land. It was a ghost of a chance. A desperate, dark, and dangerous chance. But it was the only one they had. Outside, the gunfire was dying down. The main house was now a raging inferno. Hartwell's men would be coming to count the bodies. "Show me," Cole said. Nalish, the boy who started it all, showed them the entrance. It was hidden behind a set of old wooden shelves. Cole peered into the darkness. It was a black mouth leading into the earth. Claustrophobic. Tight. Barely wide enough for one person to crawl through. "I'll go first," Cole said. "If it's clear, I'll send word back." Ayanna grabbed him, her grip like steel. "If something happens to you, what becomes of us?" He looked at her, at the faces of her people looking to him, and he finally understood. He wasn't just their employer. He wasn't just their protector. He had become their leader. "Then you lead them," he said, his voice firm. "You know these lands. You can get them to safety." Before she could argue, he squeezed into the opening. The darkness swallowed him whole. He crawled on his hands and knees, the rocks scraping him raw. The air was stale, dead. Behind him, he could hear the muffled shouts of Hartwell's men as they found the cellar entrance. Time was gone. Then, he saw it. A pinprick of light. He scrambled forward and emerged into a narrow, hidden canyon, a quarter-mile from the ranch. He was out. They could make it. He took a deep breath of fresh air, ready to signal for the others. And then he heard it. A sound that stopped his heart. Hoofbeats. From both ends of the canyon. Hartwell wasn't just burning the ranch. He was sweeping the entire area. He was leaving nothing to chance. They hadn't escaped into a refuge. They had escaped into a bigger trap. Suddenly, Cole remembered the letter Ayanna had been holding when this all began. The letter that could save them all. But that letter, their last, desperate hope, was now buried somewhere in the smoking ruins of his house. And Hartwell's men were closing in. The letter that could burn their whole corrupt world down was in the one place he couldn't get to. His office, in the heart of the inferno. Tucked inside the very desk Hartwell's men were probably kicking apart right now. Cole flattened himself against the cold canyon rock. The search party passed so close he could smell the sweat on their horses. He heard them talking. They had orders to dynamite any caves or mine shafts they found, to bury them alive. This wasn't just an eviction anymore. It was an extermination. But that letter, it was everything. It was the proof. 3 days ago, Ayanna's cousin Marcus, the janitor, had brought it to her. He'd found the documents in Hartwell's own wastebasket. It was a conspiracy that went all the way to the top. Forged relocation orders, bribed judges, and something worse. Something monstrous. Hartwell was selling Apache families, the ones he relocated, to mining companies as slave labor. Marcus had copied the pages. He knew they'd kill him if they found out. And they had. He'd been found dead 2 days ago. An accident, they called it. Retrieving that letter wasn't just about saving themselves. It was about getting justice for Marcus. It was about tearing down the whole rotten system. He had to go back. It was suicide. He crawled back through the suffocating darkness of the tunnel. He emerged into the chaos of the root cellar. Ayanna was a general, organizing the evacuation, moving the families into the tunnel group by group. Her grandmother sat in a corner, her face calm. She had seen too much of life to be afraid of death. "The letter," Cole whispered to Ayanna, his voice urgent. "Where is it?" Her eyes went wide. "In your desk, 3rd drawer. There's a false back." Then her face hardened. "Cole, no. The house is surrounded. It's a death trap." "Not going back means Marcus died for nothing," he said. "Without that proof, even if we get away, they'll hunt us down forever." Jake, his face grim with determination, appeared beside them. "Boss, I've been timing their patrols. There's a window. Maybe 10 minutes. After that, they're posting permanent guards on the house. 10 minutes. To get through a war zone, into a burning building, and back." He checked his pistol. This was it. "If I don't come back," he started. Ayanna cut him off, her voice fierce. "You will come back. I will be here." It wasn't a plea. It was a command. A promise. He touched her hand for a fraction of a second, and then he was gone. Back into the tunnel. He emerged into the root cellar. The air outside was thick with smoke and the smell of ruin. He moved like a ghost through the shadows, the burning outbuildings providing a screen of smoke. The front door of his house was gone. Inside was a vision of hell. Everything was smashed, overturned, destroyed. His desk was in the middle of the room, drawers ripped out, papers scattered. They had been clumsy, brutal. They were soldiers, not detectives. His fingers found the hidden catch. The false panel slid open, and there they were, the folded pages that could change the world. He shoved them inside his shirt, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against the paper. Then he heard the voice, Hartwell's voice, right outside. Check the house again, thoroughly this time. If Meridian is alive, he'd come back for something. A man like that always has a secret. Hartwell was right, but he had no idea what the secret really was. Two of Hartwell's men entered the house, rifles up. Cole flattened himself in the shadows by the ruined doorway. He waited for them to move deeper inside. Then he slipped out. He was almost clear, almost to the canyon. A shout ripped through the air. "There he is!" A mounted patrol had seen him. Rifle shots cracked, bullets kicking up dust around his feet. He dove headfirst into the tunnel opening as splinters of rock exploded around him. He could hear them dismounting, coming after him on foot. The tunnel that was their salvation had just become his tomb. He scrambled through the darkness, the sounds of his pursuers echoing behind him. He burst out into the root cellar. Chaos. Half the families were through the tunnel, but the children and the elderly were still here. There was no time. "They found me!" he yelled. "They're right behind me!" Immediately, the young Apache warriors, led by Chaza, formed a defensive line at the tunnel entrance, a rear guard, buying time with their lives. Cole shoved the papers into Ayana's hands. "Get these to a newspaper. Denver, San Francisco, somewhere they can't reach. They are the only thing that matters now." He turned to join the defensive line. The mathematics were simple and brutal. Someone had to stay. Someone had to die, so the others could live. The first of Hartwell's men appeared in the tunnel opening. A volley of rifle fire from the Apache warriors drove him back. But more were coming. The cellar filled with smoke, the roar of guns, the screams of the wounded. In a brief, terrifying lull, Cole saw his chance. The way to the other end of the tunnel was clear. Ayana was there, helping her grandmother into the passage. He could run. He could make it. And then he heard it. A child's cry. Nailish. The 12-year-old boy was trapped near the tunnel entrance, pinned under a heavy beam that had been shaken loose by the fighting. Cole didn't think. He just acted. He abandoned his escape. He charged back into the thickest of the fighting, into the smoke and the bullets. He found the boy, his face covered in blood, his eyes wide with terror. "I can't move my legs," Nalish whispered in Apache. Cole heaved the beam off him, scooped the boy into his arms, and turned to run, and found his way blocked. 3 territorial soldiers stood there, their rifles leveled directly at his heart. There was no mercy in their eyes. "Cole Meridian," the lead soldier said, his voice cold and official. "By order of Commissioner Hartwell, you are under arrest for treason." Treason. Not obstruction. Treason. A crime punishable by immediate execution. No trial. No judge. Hartwell was taking no chances. This was the end of the line. But just as the soldiers raised their rifles, a new voice cut through the chaos. It was calm. It was powerful. And it came from behind them. "Stand down, Sergeant. This man is under federal protection." A man stepped out of the shadows. He wore the crisp blue uniform of a United States Army colonel. And behind him stood a full squad of regular Army soldiers, their rifles aimed not at Cole, but at Hartwell's men. In an instant, the entire world had turned upside down. "Colonel Samuel Redwater," the man announced. Cole knew the name, a famous negotiator, a man of honor. But his presence here was impossible. "The documents you sent to Senator Morrison arrived in Denver yesterday morning," the colonel said to Cole. "The senator contacted the War Department. I was sent to investigate." Cole's mind reeled. He hadn't sent any documents. He didn't know any senator. Then he looked across the smoke-filled cellar. He saw Ayana, and on her face was a look of fierce, secret triumph. It hit him like a lightning bolt. Marcus, the brave janitor, hadn't just brought the copies to Ayanna. He had sent other copies out. To a senator. To newspapers. To the War Department. He had built a web. A network of justice. He knew he was going to die. And he had made sure his death would not be in vain. Just then, Commissioner Hartwell appeared at the entrance to the cellar, ready to witness his final victory. Instead, he walked into his own doom. "Colonel Redwater," Hartwell sputtered, his face draining of all color. "What is the meaning of this? I have territorial authority." "You have nothing," Redwater cut him off, his voice like ice. "Your authority is suspended. You and your men are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and the violation of federal treaties." The change was absolute. The hunters had become the hunted. Within the hour, Hartwell and his cronies were in chains, and Colonel Redwater held a new set of papers from Washington. Papers that didn't just protect Ayanna's people. They granted them permanent, legal rights to live on the land. On Cole's ranch. As the sun set, casting long shadows over the smoldering ruins of his life's work, Cole sat with Ayanna on a low stone wall. "What happens now?" she asked. He looked at the ashes, and he saw a new beginning. "Now," he said, taking her hand, "we build something better. Together." The letter that had started it all lay on the wall between them. But its true power was never the ink on the paper. It was the courage of ordinary people. A janitor, a young girl, a broken rancher, people willing to risk everything. As the first stars appeared, they began to plan a future that no one could have imagined. A place where the boundaries had been erased. A world built not on promises written on paper, but on a single promise kept. The one he had made to her, and she to him. The promise to stand together. Always. 3 months later, the Meridian Ranch was reborn. It wasn't just a ranch anymore. It was a community. Apache families and white cowboys, working side by side. A new schoolhouse stood where the barn used to be. Inside, Cole watched as Ayanna taught a class of Apache and white children, their heads bent together over the same books. This was his real legacy. Not the land, not the cattle. This. The news from the capital was good. Hartwell and 17 other officials were going to prison for a very long time. The documents Marcus had died for had brought down an entire corrupt regime. Millions of acres were being returned to the tribes. But the biggest victory was the one closest to home. Under pressure from the federal government, the territory had been forced to legally recognize their marriage. The ceremony had been simple, performed by Ayanna's grandfather under the shadow of the Red Mesa. It was a bond not of law, but of spirit. Now, it was both. As evening fell, Cole and Ayanna sat on the porch of their new home, built from stone from that very same mesa. Ayanna's hand rested on her stomach, where their first child was growing. A child of 2 worlds, who would be born into one. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Giving up everything you had built?" He had lost his empire. He had lost his fortune. He had made enemies for life. By any measure, he had lost. But then he looked out at the land. He saw children of all colors playing together. He heard the sound of laughter, a mix of English and Apache drifting up from the bunkhouse. He had never felt so rich. "I didn't give up the life I had built," he said, pulling her close. "I traded it for the life I was always meant to live." He had once been Cole Meridian, a king in a lonely kingdom. Now he was something more. A husband, a father-to-be, a bridge. The letter was framed now, hanging in their living room. A reminder that the biggest changes often start with the smallest acts of courage. The woman who had once been cast aside now sat beside the man who had sworn she would never be left again. And in keeping that promise, they had done more than save a small band of people. They had shown a divided world a new way forward. A future built not on conquest, but on a love strong enough to change history itself. If you were moved by this story of courage and love against all odds, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because there are always more strange, dark, and mysterious stories to tell.